back.
We shall return to NRES.
Actually, my last one on NRAS, which might be on notice, because I don't think Senator Payne asked it, is around the income thresholds to be able to apply for an NRAS house. Are they up on the website at the moment, the latest income cut-offs?
They should be, Senator. I haven't looked recently, but my understanding is that they should be up now.
Okay, thank you. Maybe if you could just provide us on notice with the last known update when they were put up there, and we'll go and have a check. Okay,
Yes.
I wanted to just briefly change the subject and go to affordable home ownership. There was nothing new in the budget that I saw. They'll be happy to be contradicted. Although the scheme to help pensioners who already have a home to downsize. So we'll have to see how that works out. Do we have figures on the current gap of affordable homes to purchase for the bottom 40% of income earners?
Senator, the National Housing Supply Council publishes figures on supply as it affects affordability.
Yeah.
It's actually a responsibility of the Treasury portfolio.
Yeah.
And the question is probably best directed to the Treasury portfolio.
That's the last bit of fragmentation in this portfolio, which is a shame, although it's better than it was.
I understand they're on tomorrow and the next day.
Yeah, all right, we'll keep jumping between them. But it's kind of a shame that I understand that you might not be in charge of compiling those figures, but are you also not in possession of them?
Sorry, I don't have them with me.
Okay, but they do exist.
But the figures exist. My understanding is the National Housing Supply Council publishes regular reports, and their last report was in March this year.
Okay. Where I'm going is, if you can provide us, again, this might need to be on notice, with the amount that the federal government has spent on the first homeowners grant, which I understand is mostly state expense, or might at the moment might even be entirely state expenditure.
That's also a Treasury matter.
Is it?
Yeah.
First homeowners boost is Treasury as well?
That is indeed correct.
Okay. So you won't know then how many people utilise the Home Savers account since it was introduced?
I don't have those figures.
Okay.
No.
If that stuff's all in the Treasury portfolio, and I get to torment them a little bit later in the week,
I'll let them know that that's something to look forward to.
Does the department have any other forms of assistance for first homeowners or low-income earners to get onto the housing ladder? So, for example, State of Western Australia has a shared equity scheme, which I understand works quite well. Does the Commonwealth support such schemes anywhere in the country?
It's not
I don't think so either.
It's only the first homeowner grants that were previously provided through Treasury primarily are all provided through state and territory governments.
Okay. So there's no Commonwealth assistance for people on not even low incomes anymore, even medium incomes, to get into the housing, to home ownership, apart from that, which is a Treasury responsibility, nothing on shared equity. Have they been investigated? Has it been looked into and let go of, supporting shared equity schemes? Or not?
I think that'd be something you'd need to ask the Treasury.
So is home ownership entirely divorced from FAXIA? Is it just supported public housing, social housing that we do here?
We don't have programs for home ownership within FAXIA.
That's probably the answer I was after. Yeah. Minister, is there a reason why that fragmentation in the portfolio remains? And I take on board, you say, we introduced a housing minister for the first time. That's something we've been calling for. Brought most of the housing portfolio under one roof for the first time. Why is housing supply and home ownership still remain outside this portfolio? What's the reason for that?
Yeah.
I'm happy to seek some advice about that from a structural point of view, but I think there's a natural. I'm quite sure that the officers in FAXIA in the housing section, converse with their colleagues in Treasury regularly around the policy questions, but in terms of the design of policy that will support people in the private ownership section of housing, I mean, that's historically been the role of, been historically in Treasury.
Yeah, but I mean, historically, we didn't have a housing minister, and it was a really good thing to fix that.
The Treasury would be able to give a much more fulsome answer, but one of the key things from the Commonwealth perspective will be things like interest rates and those sorts of things, which are much more global figures, which is why those kinds of measures sit within the Treasury. At a much smaller scale, certainly the projects around BBRC and HAF are things that are, moving towards the supply of housing. So they're the sorts of things that our department does, but in terms of that kind of overall housing affordability, mortgage affordability, they are things that, sit better with the kind of broader structural things like interest rates.
All right. So we probably shouldn't waste your time anymore if it's simply not something you've got responsibility for. Are you okay if I move to social housing? Is that all right? Okay. Could you give us the most up-to-date figure on the social housing waiting list, and if it's possible to disaggregate public and community housing by state and territory? And if you're happy to not rattle off a whole table full of data, we can get that tabled if you'd prefer. Maybe just hit us with the headline number, and then if you're able to table the disaggregated figures, that could work. I'm a wee bit short of time, so maybe we just get it on notice. Is that possible? Yep. Okay. Well, I'm keen to know what the average waiting time in WA is for priority and non-priority applicants. You may not have that right in front of you as well.
No, I don't.
Okay, so the size of the waiting list, but then also what that actually means, or what people are experiencing for priority and non-priority applicants, with particular regard to WA. My understanding is that it would take a build of approximately 20,000 dwellings a year to get back up to 5% of all stock. Does that number sound approximately within the ballpark?
Certainly the number's lower than 5% at the moment.
It is.
Yes, we haven't done
depend on what year you're talking.
We haven't done a calculation on what it would cost to change that. Okay.
Do you want to provide an estimate for us to a baseline year of 2020 of how many dwellings you would need to get back up to 5% of all stock?
Can I say we can look at what we can do? Yeah,
thank you. And whether or not the government still has a target of social housing as a proportion of all stock that you're working towards. So I picked 5%, that's where it used to be. Is that something I could attribute to the Commonwealth? Does the Commonwealth actually have a target?
It's not something that's articulated at this point in time. Obviously, the government, through the stimulus and other housing initiatives, has been continuing to support the growth in public housing stock, but we don't have the control over the final numbers.
Okay. Moving on. Do you have any idea where the states stand now in terms of meeting the COAG agreed commitments to transfer 35% of housing stock into the community sector by 2014? And again, if that's a big batch of numbers, I'd just ask you to table that.
If you're wanting, Senator, were you wanting a breakdown by state?
I think it would be useful, to know how we're tracking. Yep. Thank you. And the degree to which those transfers are with title as opposed to how much are around tenancy management. I believe you've provided that for us before. That exists. For probably like 12 months or so, I think was the last time you put those to us. Mm-hmm. So that would be great. Look, last one from me. Minister Butler's press release of yesterday proposing that states should cut stamp duty for pensioners for obvious reasons, I guess, to just remove that amount of friction in the housing market to allow people to downsize and move on. I wonder whether the Minister has a proposal for where state governments should get the revenue if they cut stamp duties. Doesn't sound like a bad idea, but the states already operate on a perilously narrow tax base. What is the Commonwealth's proposal for the states to make up that shortfall?
I don't think that we would be wanting to comment on where the states or territories would be able to get additional revenue from.
Well, you're commenting on where they should draw revenue down, which is easy enough to do.
It's a ministerial.
The minister.
Perhaps you should put a question on notice to the Minister.
Yes, it's a ministerial.
Perhaps I'll put a question on notice to the Minister. Firstly,
Can't wait to see the response.
well, yeah. Firstly, and I know this is coming across as maybe a little bit cheeky, which is really unlike me, but maybe to frame it a little bit more broadly, how is the department working with states on the issue of stamp duty? It's a serious issue. It's not something that would happen rapidly. It's in the Henry Tax Review. It's been canvassed for years and years. What's the Commonwealth actually doing to advance that agenda besides putting out press statements? And that might have to come back on paper unless you've got something at hand.
Seemed to be a treasury issue, I would guess.
Yeah,
Maybe it's a Treasury thing?
It's a Treasury question.
So you're ducking all the hard ones.
Take it up with them.
Mind you, I mean, this is the Housing Minister's press statement, so it's all very well to handball me off to another
The
portfolio.
Housing Minister is also responsible for this part of Treasury that deals with those issues.
Sneaky, okay. Whether there was a reason why he singled out pensioners as a cohort more deserving than other groups, first home owners, low-income earners generally, you're just going to dish me off to Treasury, aren't you? I can see it. I can see it in your eyes. I'll leave it there. Thanks.